All right, joining me once again here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is my friend Emily Atkin. Emily is a climate reporter for Think Progress, which you can find at thinkprogress.org. You can also follow her on Twitter at @morwe. Emily, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Thank you for having me again. Great to be here.
All right, so Emily, we've covered on the show before how the Pentagon and the Department of Defense have long been warning about the threat to U.S. national security posed by climate change. And actually last week, a new report from the Pentagon on that topic was released. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, a new report was released. It's about climate. It's about adapting to the risks that climate change poses to national security. It was really, when I took a look at it, I thought to myself, oh, it's another one. You know what I'm saying? It was just kind of like, oh, another report from the Department of Defense saying that climate change poses a risk. Here are all the risks that it poses to national security, and here is what we should do about it. So as I guess you can imagine, there are a number of risks that climate change poses to national security. Some of them have to do with melting sea ice. When sea ice melts, it opens up channels for ships to come through. So there are more routes that need to be monitored for potential threats, that kind of thing. Climate change has the ability to worsen droughts in conflict-ridden areas in Africa and the Middle East. Droughts fuel conflict just, because of the lack of resources. They stress people out. People start fighting for water. It's the most natural kind of conflict there is. You know what I'm saying? As climate change threatens national security in many ways, not just our national security, but other countries as well. So it was your basic, look, this is a problem, again, what we've heard numerous times.
Right. Again, they always say that this is a threat multiplier, which is something they've long been saying that again, because of the insecurity caused by things like lack of water, with rising sea levels, what this actually does is it destabilizes countries, which actually, not only the threat to our own coastlines, which is actually part of the climate change as well, but the actual, the way it destabilizes the globe and makes more and more people insecure actually does pose a risk for things like terrorism in the future.
Definitely. Well, that's I think that speaks to the wider problem of climate change, too, is that it doesn't directly cause a lot of things. It directly causes sea level rise and overall temperature rise and ocean acidification, but those things cause other things. Climate change is a threat multiplier in a number of ways. When there's increased drought, there's increased problems with food. It's not just the defense system. Climate change has all these indirect threats, that it causes a problem that causes another problem, and that's what the national security threat is too.
Yeah, and again, what always just kills me about this is that, when I remember one of the last reports that came out maybe a few months ago, because they release these probably every 6 months. There's annual reports, but there's different aspects of this because this is a big actual threat to global security. One thing that always cracks me up is you read the reports and it's like, this thing could sound like it's written by the Sierra Club. It really is something that this isn't Bill McKibben writing this stuff. This isn't the Sierra Club. This is the Pentagon. And yet you have, I don't know if you saw this. I think it was last week when this was released. Fox News, I saw it on Media Matters. Fox News, a couple of the hosts were just like, you know what? I think the timing of this report is kind of wrong. It's like, have you heard there's a little something called ISIS going on? And really, we should be talking about climate change. And Chuck Hagel's talking about climate change when ISIS is here? How dare you, sir? How dare you talk about the threat of climate change when ISIS is just storming the beaches of Normandy? They didn't really say that, but that's what they're saying.
Because there's no way that you can talk about long-term strategy when other things are going on now, obviously. The Department of Defense is definitely not a huge organization that has resources to combat threats happening now and future threats, because that's totally not what the military is supposed to do, right? Come on, dude.
No, it's also that you can't possibly handle two things at once. No, you only can focus on one thing at a time. And look, and I'll say it right here. Climate change is a bigger threat to national security and the United States than ISIS is. It's a bigger threat than the Ebola virus. It is a bigger threat to us than ISIS. And, you know, again, these right-wing clowns just are just like, you know, oh, no, we can't talk about this now. The truth is they never want to talk about it.
Exactly. You know, I'm not an expert on Ebola or ISIS. And, you know, I'll definitely leave it to someone who's an expert on both to say what's a bigger threat. But with my expertise and what I've been looking into the threat of climate change, it's definitely at least on par, especially for your long term. I think that a lot of people, and especially news outlets, news media, television, they really want to focus on the threat right now, today. You know, what's going to hurt us today, or what's going to ravage our economy today. But the thing is, climate change doesn't lend itself to that kind of analysis. It's a long-term thing. It happens gradually, and it's something that its gradual nature is actually the worst part about it, because it has a gradual nature that every single day it gets less and less likely that we can stop it. But we can't. But like, we still can't see it. At least in America, we can't see it with our eyes. It's like almost invisible. Unless you're looking at graphs, or unless you're living on an island, or you're living in Antarctica and you're seeing ice melt. You know, it's just like our daily life doesn't affect us.
And you know, we've been taught by the media and right wingers to like not trust science in this country too. So like, when scientists are like screaming at the top of their lungs, no, we really need to care about climate change, you know, people just sort of shrug their shoulders and stuff. One thing that that always bugs me about this too is just like, and I actually, you know, I think we've talked about this. I always talk about this on the show, but I think I even talked about this last time you were here about, you know, Democrats are definitely better than Republicans on climate, but Democrats and Obama certainly aren't doing what actually needs to be done when it comes to this. It's like, why? It really just seems to me like Republicans are so crazy about attacking Democrats whenever they say anything anti-military, or like the right wing always attacks the left when like we criticize war. But here you have an entire like half of the political spectrum ignoring the Pentagon, and the fact that, like, you know, it's like, what, you don't trust the Pentagon now? Like, you're the ones who love the Pentagon so much, but when the Pentagon wants to talk about this, so much so that, like, they've actually voted that the Pentagon is supposed to ignore climate change. But, like, that also seems to be something that such a missing political opportunity for the left to really just pounce on the right when they are, like, who like, are constantly just kissing the Pentagon's butt, to be completely ignoring them when it's come to something like climate change.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's really interesting to me how a lot of House Republicans and Republicans in Congress in general will work to act against their expertise. I mean, this contradiction that I'm immediately thinking about is how when politicians, Republicans specifically, are asked, what do you think about climate change? Do you think it exists? Do you think it's caused by humans? And they say, oh, well, I'm not a scientist. I don't know. Like, you know, why don't you ask a scientist? And obviously, we all know what scientists say about this issue. It's wide consensus on this issue. But, you know, they still act against their expertise to prevent any policies dealing with climate change. And it's the same thing with the Pentagon. It's like, you trust the Pentagon, but then as soon as the Pentagon acts within their expertise to be like, listen, we're military experts, House Republicans are like, well, you know what? We're military experts now, so you don't know anything.